Welcome to yet another episode of the Citizens Chat Show here. And today we woke up in another wake in another occurrence that happened in yet this very continent. Yesterday we saw in Gabon yet another coup which took us by storm. And today we are delving deeper into these democratic processes, the moment of democracy in Africa, and trying to get into the core of the issues, why things are happening the way they are, and why we will get into the issues around Gabon. We would like to bring it a structured discussion from a wider point, which is challenging democracy in Africa while studying the outcomes of elections. Largely, we have seen in Sierra Leone in the last 2 months. We saw Zimbabwe in the last 1 week. And we saw yesterday what happened in Gabon. We shall get deeper into the details for our dear viewers and to the content and who are the antagonists and protagonists in these particular elections. But for today, for this moment, let me introduce my very capable panelists. And today I'll start from my left-hand side. I have Dr. Bireete-ED from the Center for Constitutional Governance, but also one of the coordinators at the East and Horn, the chairperson actually at the East and Horn of Africa Election Observers Network. You're most welcome.
Thank you, Olaa, and good afternoon, viewers.
Yeah, you can maybe briefly also tell us about the network.
No, East and Horn of Africa Election Observers Network is a network of domestic observers in the countries in the East Africa, that is East African Community, Great Lakes, and the Horn of Africa, if you take the membership of IGAD. Yeah. And we coordinate work on elections, observation, as well as the integrity of elections. Yeah.
You're most welcome. Next to her, we have Dr. Denis Musinguzi, who is a senior lecturer at Uganda Martyrs University. You're most welcome.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
My pleasure to be here.
Yeah. We have Mr. Henry Muguzi, the overall coordinator, African Election Observers Network, AFIONET. You're most welcome. But you can also brief us a bit about what AFIONET does.
Yeah, thank you, my brother. Thank you for having me and the fellow panelists. The African Election Observers Network is a coordinating platform for African election regional observers networks. So as you can see, we have EHON for Eastern and Horn of Africa.
Yeah.
Then you have the Western Africa Election Observers Network. We also have the Southern Africa Election Support Network.
Yes.
So Africa Election Observers Network brings together those.
All of them.
And then ours is to coordinate all efforts geared towards Africa's democratic renewal.
Yes. Yeah, you're most welcome. And we believe it's the right moment to have you, given the wide nature of our discussion, or the Africa-wide nature of the issue at hand. And finally, we have retired Major Awich Pollar, firstly a lawyer and a former UN judge at Geneva, but also currently a double director at the National Resistance Movement. He directs the Secretariat dealing with external affairs, but also the legal affairs. You're most welcome.
Thank you. Only that of late, His Excellency the President appointed a substantive director for legal.
Yes.
Replacing Oscar Kihika, who was appointed Judge Court of Appeal. So we now have a substantive director for legal. I now remain with my mandate of external affairs.
Yes.
It makes work a lot little now.
Yeah. You're most welcome. Yes, and our dear viewers, like I said, today we are discussing elections, the trial of democracy in Africa, but focusing on three main case studies. One of them we have is Sierra Leone, where we had an election in June, largely decried upon by international observers. The man in the lights in Sierra Leone is the president himself, Mr. Mada Bio, where we saw a lot of issues regarding the elections, including intimidation. We saw violence, bullets fired, including a senior member of the opposition party shot live during the announcements. We saw the hijacking of the electoral commissioner, who then had to announce the president, as the winner of that election. Moving to Zimbabwe, with another election decried upon, and I think that's something very interesting for the election observers. We saw the issues with election observation, including late granting of visas for people from observer bodies like the Carter Foundation. We saw the beakery with the SADC observers and among other issues. But largely, the election was also questioned on many grounds. We saw the election in Gabon on Wednesday, where we had Mr. Bongo announced president, but just one day later, ironically removed by a man called Nguema, which is a very ironic name for someone taking away a dictator, given the neighboring Equatorial Guinea. But those are some of the issues we have at hand, and I would like to start with Dr. Sarah Bireete. What do you make of these three elections, and the fact that they're being denounced or decried upon by the international observers? From your observer point of view, do you agree with some of the comments made that many of these elections were mired with violence, intimidation, and perhaps there should be there should be items recommended like reruns or re-elections?
Maybe to begin with is to state the fact that there are standards
Yes.
for elections or for an exercise to be called an election.
Yes.
And in most of the African countries, what transpires as elections really normally is not worthy of the name elections. You have the standards of transparency, you have the standards of accountability, a leveled ground.
Yes.
for all contenders to campaign. You have the security of election materials.
Yes.
You have guidelines on how the transmission of elections should be done and the role of the observers, just to mention but a few, and the media coverage. So if you look at most of the elections, going by the most recent Zimbabwe, Sierra Leone, Zimbabwe, and Gabon, in Sierra Leone we had to literally airlift our colleagues whose lives were threatened after the first release of domestic election observer reports. Our colleagues in New Sierra Leone, the National Elections Watch Sierra Leone, were threatened both through cyberbullying, a statement released by the government and the Electoral Commission after release of the parallel voter transmission tally and initial statement on elections.
Yes.
And we had to, I think people are still stuck in Ghana.
Yeah.
We had through the networks to get them out because their lives were in danger.
True.
And they were even first held at the airport. So when from there you come to Zimbabwe, accreditation was a nightmare. Our application as EHON, the ministry, and the accreditation was done by Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Yes, yes.
Not Electoral Commission, and that's contrary to the provisions.
Was it eventually granted? Because the issue for some was that there was a delay.
Ours was not granted. They under the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Good Governance, it should be the Electoral Commissions to accredit and observe following the Electoral Commission Act or a similar act in other countries. But for the case of Zimbabwe, we are first writing to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Immediately we wrote as a EHON, our application was received, but we never, that's where it stopped. We just stopped at the acknowledgement that the application was received, but go ahead now to present our credentials before the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission or Election Management Body. I think the West Africans use that name. We didn't reach that level. But contrary to the fears we had before, many other international agencies were accredited, although there were delays in accreditation, which were deliberate, so that the short-term observation is really short. Like you fly in, and the next day is elections, and you don't get to know the details of what is transpiring. But the emerging issues included, misallocation of voters. You find a couple residing in Kampala, but a man has been transferred to Mukono, the wife has been transferred to Entebbe, just to make sure that you fail to vote, especially in opposition strongholds. But also, our colleagues then, the domestic election observer teams, their centers were raided. The way Ugandan data center was raided, and 35 people arrested, charged in court with attempts to announce results which had not happened because voting was still ongoing. The same scenario with this. What happened to us South Africa now? When you go to, and then internet was degraded. But I'm glad that the international observers are becoming more bold in their statements. If the election is not free and not fair, they are stating it. Because we've been in our engagements, taking them on trying to sound diplomatic on matters that touch deep on sovereignty. And we are glad that they are more bold now, and they are speaking the same language with the domestic election observers, because previously it has been 2 worlds apart.
True.
And so if you go now to Gabon, where the disagreement in election has resulted in a coup, you had a total shutdown of internet, that harassment, total closure of civic space, until the agitation of the people now forced the army to do what they've done. And then you see an ailing president saying, please make some noise. I think he even forgets. I said ailing. He limps when he's walking. At times he wants to fall. It has nothing to do with age. I don't know his age.
He's around 59.
And I'm not interested
No,
in
64.
the age.
He's 64.
Yeah, but I don't think he's physically fit even to be running for president. Given the way he walks, it should be somebody on bed rest. Yeah, so you close internet and then you say make some noise, but you've been even arresting all activists, and now you are realizing that they could be useful therapy and solution. So as I conclude, really, so Africa generally lacks democracy. This is a manifestation of a democracy deficiency that is deep, that is chronic. So if for Africa really and I know we are coming out of the BRICS, the BRICS summit that is trying to expand. For Africa to develop, there is no gamble about it. We must democratize. Yeah, there is no two way about it, in my view.
Yes. Thank you very much. I would like to bring you Mr. Muguzi, just to expand more on this issue around observers before we delve into wider issues. I think it would really help if you explain for the citizen out there what election observers do and if they have any actual effect. We normally see them coming here during elections. We have seen them in Zimbabwe. We have seen the statements that were made, but we now also, for Zimbabwe's case, we saw bicary between the government and some of the observer reports, because I saw one of the people from government dismissing it as personal opinions. So how relevant or how important are observers, especially given your unique position coordinating them at an African level for our citizens?
Thank you very much. So I think viewers want to understand that observers fall into 2 broad categories.
Yes.
There are others that are international. These ones come from outside of the country. They come mainly on invitation of the home government. So the likes of EU observers, Commonwealth Group, blah, blah, these are international observers. But the other category are the citizen observers. The citizen observers literally basically are citizens of the country. They work on democracy.
Yes.
They have an interest in improving their own livelihoods, but also to participate in their country's governance as citizens. So they have groups, and these groups also observe elections. Now, when you speak about those 3 elections, I was privileged to be in Sierra Leone.
Yes.
And I looked at what happened. I literally had to smuggle myself out. Because, yes, I had to run, board a boat, You know, in Sierra Leone, you have to board a boat from the capital city to go to where you will find the airport. And that boat doesn't actually, it takes time, it goes in intervals. So I had to wait.
Modern boat?
It's not a modern boat, it goes down, you know, I had to put on my life jacket because you're not sure it's going to. Yeah, but I think its capacity is about 42 people. So it fills up. It waits until everybody has, you know, it's fully subscribed, then it takes off. But while waiting for it to take off, I was, you know, looking over my shoulder because it happened after the colleagues had put out you know, their own findings of the results and were contradicting what the EMB had put out there. But if you look at Sierra Leone, one thing you see there is, first of all, the capture of the electoral management body, but also the assault on citizen observers. You know, and then you come to Zimbabwe. So the citizen observers in Zimbabwe, first of all, it was a hassle to accredit them. And then they get accredited, then they had to pay for every single observer they fielded. Now, one of our groups is Zimbabwe Election Support Network. They had around 10,000 observers, and they had to pay $20 per each of them. So literally, they had to fork out a lot of money they never had. The same thing happens to Gabon. So except in Gabon, you see, after 56 years of the Bongo family in power, they have been so repressive that they have closed out all the space. So in Gabon, you will not have a group of citizens that are working around the democracy. Or the elections. Pretty much what I think is likely to happen here, because, you know, when you arrest observers, you are sending signals to the rest of the groups coming through, and any other one who might have a hard appetite to work to get in any elections that don't get here. So Gabon had nothing. But for Zimbabwe, of course, the observers try to do their work. Normally, the work we do as citizen observers does not only stop at elections. We, first of all, as citizens of the country, we have a stake. And therefore, we are permanently engaged in the process of improving governance, but also democracy and elections. So elections are part of the platforms we use to engage. But even then, after elections, we stay on the ground as citizen observers. And will be the ones to now engage with the relevant institutions on reforms, including parliament. Now, the danger, the fear, where the fear of autocratic states comes from when it comes to citizen observers, is that they can accommodate and tolerate the international observers. You know why? These are coming out of the country. They have limited understanding of the context. But you see, the citizens have been watching them. So if anybody is to watch them closely and expose every single flaw that they're doing, it is the citizens. Which is why you saw that the Sierra Leone government was uncomfortable. As Sarah has mentioned, we had to airlift our colleagues because the regime had directed that they get to be arrested. We had to get them out of there. So in Zimbabwe, arresting them was out of fear that they actually had the real results, and they were about to release them because they arrested them at around 11 a.m. in the evening.
In Zimbabwe, they arrested
11 p.m. in the evening.
The local observers.
Yes, the citizen observer groups. So they observed, they raided the data centers and literally arrested everybody that was there. They confiscated all the equipment, computers, phones, and so on, including cables that were connecting these things, including computer cables and so on. They arrested everything. But they tried to make sure that they nip in the bud any effort or any attempt at releasing any results. So why are these state governments in fear of the results collected and announced by citizen observers? Is that they will contradict what they will put out there. It's what Sierra Leone feared, because up to today, the citizen observer group has collected all the results and tallied all of them. So what the electoral management body declared is contradicts. especially in areas where the opposition had a stronghold.
Yes.
The same thing happened to Zimbabwe.
Yes.
So they made sure they don't. Now, with Gabon, I think I don't want to speak about Gabon, but one of the things that distressed me most, in the build-up to elections,
Yes.
there was violence, state-sponsored violence against supporters of the opposition candidate, Professor Ondo Osa. On election day, they turned the internet completely off. And of course, like Sarah was saying, you've turned the internet off. Now you're saying, oh, make a noise. So we make a noise with what? You've turned off the internet. Come on. You should have known this.
With your mouth.
Now, they did not stop there. He imposed a curfew on election day. And then the counting of elections and tallying took forever. Elections conducted on Monday, on Saturday the 26th, 27th, 28th, the results are delayed. The opposition guy had to come out and declare himself winner. So those delays, but did not stop there. They shut down all the media organizations, basically to black out the country, until the media had to swing into action. So we have seen many of these things being done at citizens, and it's a situation that is worrying. But I think for us, the concern as AFIONET is the rights, the consistent violation of the rights of citizen observers, okay? Forgetting that these are citizens who have a right to participate in their own election. You look in hindsight and look at Uganda coming up in 2026. Sarah, me, I don't know. If they could arrest us, on the 26th, on that 14th day of January, what will happen now? Are they going to shoot, to kill? I don't know, because we fear for the worst. But the trend we are seeing, and remember, Mnangagwa was in Kampala 2 weeks prior to the election.
Yes.
He came on a private visit, secretly consulted with the General Museveni. We do not know what tricks, but what did we see afterwards? The same thing that was we faced as citizen observers in Uganda, and the same things our colleagues faced in Zimbabwe. So I think the work of citizen observers is under threat, and that should be worrying.
All right. I'd like to bring in Third Major Pollar, which when many people looking at the trends, the trends of coups and some of the things that caused them, it's the repression of democracy. With the repression of democracy, preceding it, have alluded to stating that Cameroon should watch out. Uganda's name has also come out a lot, especially on social media.
Cameroon and Uganda are candidates.
that effectively are candidates. Also, that some of the things are accused in some of these countries, around intimidation, acts like removing internet, which also happened in Uganda. Given now that there's a wave of coup d'etats, instability, and we can see the connection between each other. Is NRM, learning anything from this situation on the continent, the state of democracy, and will it be able to adjust some of its operational methods come 2026?
The question is whether or not NRM is learning something from the continent. In fact, to the contrary, I wish the continent had learned from NRM. They wouldn't have gone there.
Yes.
They should have learned before. They wouldn't have gone there. And that is the reason why we're going there for this long. You see, it all starts with the spirit. The spirit of whether or not you accept democracy, which with this ingredient aspect of election.
Yes.
We do. And I've said this, even during Corona, there were many schools of thought which told Museveni that, Your Excellency, there's a way you can go through this. There's Corona, let's not go for election. He refused. He said, we have to go for election. So once you have the spirit, then you are there. 2, the spirit must be followed by the infrastructural network. Election laws, right from the Constitution, from the relevant election laws, from the appointment of the election commissions. We may disagree as to formality of appointing, but at least you know that election commission is they are nominated in parliament, they are appointed by parliament, and then, appointed, vetted by parliament, and, the procedural aspect. We may disagree on whether or not it's a refined procedure, but it is there. So once you have this infrastructural legal framework, then your spirit is tested. Now, the test of the spirit in this case is this. How would you justify that there was a belt where there was opposition in Uganda and they won? And there were a belt of support for NRM and they won. You know that in a central region and neighborhood, they said that vote anything umbrella. And they added, even if it is a Nanga, you vote, we shall sort it out later. I don't know why they thought Nanga was the worst case scenario. And NRM lost in all this, including the vice president losing, including the Nan-Kabira. Now, this is testing the spirit. Now, if you were saying you're keen on rigging, why would you choose to rig in Nyamshozi, win, and lose in all the opposition area? So that is a test of the spirit that you're convicted. And if you read the turnaround, of course, many voices will come up the opposition. That is now what brings a discrepancy between the people and the agitators. The agitators, the political actors, will always say there was rigging. But the people who saw it will remain behind. Say, just a minute. If there was this rigging, how comes that NRM only won where we knew they had support? And they lost in all the areas that we know they don't have. The areas they declared vote umbrella, even if it is a Nanga, they voted. So you mean they could not rig for the vice president second? They couldn't rig for how the entire Uganda? Where the opposition won both in presidential and parliamentary. So now you are testing the spirit. Now, the other aspect is the nature of the army. The nature of the army is actually the basis. The army has doctrines, army doctrines. And unfortunately, in the West African country, doctrines of the army were still the colonial army. The doctrine of the army, for example, if you have an imperial army, no, first a colonial army, like you have the King of England, we used to call it King's Army. They even had it in East Africa called King's African Rifle. Yes. Not the King of Uganda, the King of England. That army is trained to expansion of colonialism. If you have imperial army, imperialism, like American army, that army is trained for imperialism. Now, if you have a people's army, it is trained for the people. For example, even in the course theory, like in law, you will set a scenario over a land matter. Even in the army, they set scenario on those doctrines. For example, the American army, in classroom training, they'll set a scenario like, our friendly country, Kuwait, is attacked and annexed by a neighboring dictator, Iraq, and therefore the American army is called on to support. This is a training classroom. Now, if you have an army like NRA or UPDF now, you recruit a recruit. See, that scenario they put in the American, the scenario put in classroom is there is an insurgency where people are not involved in production. They are not going to their garden. They are not producing crops. The roads are blocked. You ask the army, what do you do to secure the people's safety? And they are engaged in production. So the doctrine goes right in your head. And also the other aspect is you have what we call political commissars. The political commissars are inbuilt commissariat system in our army, which makes critical criticism. If you got a meeting of commissars, you think you're in a meeting of rebels. Only that what they discuss there don't come in the public. So this is what makes the qualitative difference. So the rest of these West African countries are actually armies on wrong doctrines. Now, it has conflicted because it was built to safeguard the colonial infrastructure. Now it has conflicted with the real conditions. Niger, for example, the army was built to ensure that the export of uranium continues. But now the reality is you have a contradiction between the democratic forces coming on and the army. So all these matters come to the forefront when it comes, when it manifests itself into democratization process. The disconnection of internet, maybe it is on case-by-case basis. But all I know in the case of Uganda was that it was a security measure. For example, when the Kabaka visit to Kayunga, it was discovered later that some people were falsely using the media to say, you people of Bwaise, what are you still doing? In Natete, for us, we have already started burning government cars. What are you still doing there? Even when the cars were not burned. So people found it that it was actually being used as a motive of mobilization to cause insecurity. And that's when the security came in and said, no, stop this. Let's see how they'll do it. But otherwise, in a normal
What
governance...
about the issue with the observers, where we saw the attack on the observers at Africana?
The arrest and detention.
I don't have the facts. I don't have the facts. Yes, but I am saying the spirit of the democratization in Africa, which is manifesting itself in this, starts with the spirit that the leaders in that country are committed to, comes to the infrastructural or superstructural build-up, and comes also in the nature of the army. And it's all one and the same thing. How you handle it, you see the result this way. If you handle it the wrong way, you see the result this way.
Yes, thank you very much.
I wanted to ask one small question after his presentation. Uganda has switched off internet twice in 2 consecutive elections. What kind of security? I know you've given an example of Kayunga. But so that is Kayunga, the Kayunga riots happened in 2009, but in 2011 you did not switch off internet. How did Kayunga form your decision to switch off internet in 2016 and 2021, 10 years later?
No, I say that I gave a specific case of Kayunga because I was sure about the facts. But the facts leading to the other disconnection, I don't have it here. I need to check it, but I don't have it. But maybe I would imagine it is a security matter. But I will not want to guess why and how. I need to consult.
All right. I would like to bring in Doctor. We have discussed elections from the point of observers, but also Uganda going out with Major Pollar, which stating that they should actually have learned from NRM and that the ideology here is, grounded in the people, in the infrastructure. So what do you make of, firstly, the state of democracy, but also what Major Pollar, which has submitted?
Okay, thank you. Sarah and the Muguzi are observers, so they are speaking from the thick and thin of these issues.
Yes.
Pollar, my brother, is an activist and a cadre state activist, is the state itself. I'm from academia, I'm speaking from...
yes.
I'm an analyst from a distance.
Yes.
Of course, we are discussing democracy and we seem to focus on elections. Democracy is broader than elections. And as Sarah hinted at the beginning, it has participation, it has rule of law, it has accountability and all these things. And the most interesting thing is that democracy is built on the sanctity of a human person, on the dignity of a person. Because democracy is dem, which means people.
Yes.
So whether it is in election, whether it is in service delivery, we need to see the people at the center of the governance processes, in the decision making and benefiting from these issues. Pollar has said the spirit of democracy in Uganda is okay and the West should have learned from Uganda, but we know during elections, the sanctity of life of the citizens is at stake. People are arrested, people are taken in safe houses, others are killed on streets, others taken to prisons incognito. And these are the things that we've been living. You are asking us if democracy is on trial. And for me, I'm wondering, are the things we see in Gabon, in Sierra Leone, and in Zimbabwe new things for Africa? So is it the trial, or it is the manifestation of a failure, of a failed democracy?
Yeah, it's mostly in the light
something
of
that
the
we
recent wave.
yes, we are looking at the recent ways. For me, when I'm analyzing, I want to put a context, even I
Sure,
want to put a
sure.
history. We have Gabon that has been ruled for about 30 years by a father and a son.
It's
56.
56 years.
Yes, yes.
60 decades.
Is that democracy? I mean, is it the triune democracy, or democracy is seeking to reclaim its space from the two individuals who have who have defamed democracy and owned it? You talked about. I mean, when we talk about Zimbabwe, we've had two presidents since 1980. I think Zimbabwe was this the 8th or the 9th election since that time. When you go to most recent, whether it is 2008,
Yes.
the opposition won, although there was a by-election, and the president started arresting and torturing, people in the opposition, to the extent that the candidate pulled out of the by-election. But his name remained on the paper, and the election was done. And but there was agitation, and eventually there was power sharing. Years later, in the election that came by, again it is the Constitutional Court, the triumph of democracy, which ordered for the 2013 elections. The opposition was saying, no, there is no much time, we can wait, but the Constitutional Court still insisted, and the election was held. And they went to court. They wanted to withdraw the case later on because of mismanagement of elections.
Yes.
And eventually, Mugabe was again re-elected to that term. He talked about the army. I found the case of the army in Zimbabwe quite unique and peculiar, because after 2013, we begin to see the wife of the president coming on the scene and seeking to usurp the powers. And the vice president, the lady, is sacked and put aside. The Mnangagwa himself was being sacked and put aside until the army came in and said no.
Yes.
They put Mugabe under house arrest.
Yes.
They said he's still a president. And Mnangagwa, they forced him to resign officially. He had first refused. Then there was a motion of censure. And of course, those are very good, democratic ideals, but I'm peculiar about, the role of the army. And the army said, no, it's not a coup, we've not taken over. We are only helping the process.
Yes.
But the president goes out in a very undemocratic way, by the way, because the army is not the electoral commission.
True.
But later on, an election is held, and we see these kinds of trials. I mean, it is the similar case in Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone currently is what they call the Third Republic. The first one, it was the Queen of England from 61-71 who was the president. Was that democracy? I don't know.
Yes.
After that, Sierra Leone has been so turbulent. Presidents coming for 2 days, 4 days, 73 days, conflicts and all this. Well, in the Third Republic, we had seen some level of stability. Because again, 2000 and for the last 2008 and 2013, that was then 2018. One president, I think, was there for 10 years. Another one was for about 9 years.
Yes.
Until the current president, who won the previous term, is I don't know whether he's reaching out himself into the second term. The observers is what they are seeming to tell us. But for me, in all this, are we, as African continent, as he said, committed to the democracy and the democratic ideals? Talked about the army and other institutions. In Uganda, we see the Electoral Commission participating in the voting, staffing of ballots, and they are out of control. People are not given space, to make their decisions. Someone else is imposed from a distance.
Yes.
Of course, it's not that every constituency is rigged or what, but even rigging, when you refuse the candidates, when you stop the candidates from mobilizing, when you arrest them before they reach to where they are going to stay, when you do not provide electoral materials in some areas in time, and they have to vote at midday or even past 1. All those are manifestations of rigging. The election is rigged. Bobi Wine, apart from being a politician, his profession is a musician.
Yes.
And he said since the time he declared himself to be president, they cannot allow him to sing. And yet music is one of the ways through which you can even do political mobilization. So yes, democracy is on trial, and
I wanted to query you on that particular topic, that particular point that you made earlier, that it's democracy that is trying Africa. Do you think it's coming through the right means, or we have to wait for some time to see? Because I believe 4 years ago, we did not have any. I mean, we had leaders who came through military means, but they were now in civilian positions, like here in Uganda and Rwanda. But right now we have almost eight states being run directly by the military arm. Do you think that's the right?
Well, the dynamics are different.
Yes.
I used that case when I talked about Gabon and one family that has ruled for over 50 years.
Yes.
You understand. And even the current president was a military general. I mean, in Sierra Leone, in 1996, he was president for 73 days.
Yes.
until other guys, came in. If I'm to answer that, I think I need to put a context.
Yes, please.
Democracy in Europe was born in particular circumstances that suited their reality and that suited their way of thinking, their economy, their politics, their productivity. In Africa, it is something that is brought to us, and it finds us within our, confusion, our monarchism, our and the Western, I mean, the democratization process is something that is kind of still new.
Yes.
First of all, for democracy, it was the army. I mean, for even independence, many countries fought for their independence. And most of the presidents we are having today have been, kind of military generals. So in managing the transition, 1981 to 1985, here we see the role of the army in the restoration of democracy.
Yes.
So if I say militarism or war can actually be a political means of restoring democracy,
True.
It is possible. In Rwanda, in Uganda, in South Sudan, and even other countries, it is the militarism that is trying to, become the basis for democratization. So if I say, is it democracy claiming its space?
Yes.
If our political leaders become repressive, if they do not respect the ideals of democracy, and we see agitation, whether it is directly from the people or from a military general, like I talked of Zimbabwe, who is beginning to say things should be better than this, then we can say, okay, yes, democracy is expressing itself in different ways. It may not be the ideal way, but once the transition is managed and complete, maybe we can see ourselves out of our own chaos.
That's really interesting. I would like to bring in.
I want to say something about.
Yes, Major.
He posed something about the military behavior in Zimbabwe and why they acted the way they did. It's about the military doctrines that I was talking about.
Yes,
what saved Zimbabwe is that for a long time, the doctrines of many African armies, which I think remain in West Africa, were being trained by two training military teams.
Yes.
There was the Commonwealth military training team.
Yes.
British military training team, BMTT, and then there was the Canadian military training team. Somehow Nyerere, in forming the state, managed to form the Tanzanian military training team. And the Tanzanian military training team adopted its own doctrine and approach to training.
Yes.
And they're the ones who trained Zimbabwe. The Tanzanian military training team is a very robust training team. It is actually the trick to the way the Zimbabwean army behaves the way they are. And to some extent, they also did a lot of training with us. But of course, already, even the core NRM had the Tanzanian military training. So many people expected a coup in Zimbabwe. It couldn't because you already said it's not really a coup. You said it. You said
coup in the sense of
yeah. But you could see the discipline of the army and the handling of the so-called coup. Okay? So it is all about the doctrine of the training. It is very different if you see it. I've been there, I've done a cadet training of Tanzanian for 14 months. It differs. For example, just a simple example, in the Sandhurst, even press-ups, what in Swahili we call kunya gum. In Sandhurst, you do press-up and the winner takes crates of soda. In Tanzania, you have to do it. So you can see the difference. The Tanzania will test your endurance and want to see your endurance and capacity. The other one, do the little that you have, we want the winner. The winner takes crates of soda. Now, but politically, leave alone the endurance aspect, I just pick that as a clear example. But politically and ideologically, Nyerere's build-up of the army was a pro-people army. And their TMTT has done a lot of good for even other Southern Africa, leave alone Zimbabwe, I think even Mozambique and where they did training. So there is no secret about the Zimbabwean difference in militarism because the building up of the army is connected to the formation of state in Tanzania. And that's why Tanzania enjoyed stability, almost isolated stability. And their military training team has helped us to develop pro-people doctrines.
Yes, thank you very much. You had something to say, but I was also coming to
I
you.
will say it as I talk, because I maybe before you ask the question, you know, as Awich is talking about the military philosophy of UPDF, looking at its current conduct as they kidnap, torture citizens, and engage in campaigns because one of their generals is on a campaign trail. You know what goes into your mind is, okay, so what philosophy is this? What is your UPDF's philosophy, given its conduct?
Lingo and rape, rule of law.
What is it?
So.
Yes.
Kidnap citizens, torture them, and campaign in the military uniform while violating the laws of the
Major
land?
Pollar, do you have
Yeah, I have an answer.
Yes, please.
Apart from an answer, not having an answer on the question of the general involvement in politics, but there are other aspects I do. For example, torture. Torture is completely rejected in UPDF to the extent that court martials has pronounced itself on officers who are tortured. There is a case which happened in Wandegea police. During a riot, some soldiers who were involved in maintaining law and order, because the Constitution provides that when the police cannot handle, the police can call military to help. It is a constitutional provision.
Yes.
So the military was involved, and these people arrested people who are burning tires and took them to Wandegea. When he went to Wandegea, I don't know what happened in his head from the front desk to the jail. He followed the suspect and shot him dead. Court martial sentenced him to death as well. A similar thing happened in Rubaga. Some suspects, they wanted to rent to a garage, followed them in the garage and shot. Court martial sentenced them to death. There are so many court martial pronouncements against torture. On that, but of course, you know that we have an Anti-Torture Act which provides that any state operative, you go to exercise your duty and you break somebody's testicle, is not now a defense that sue Attorney General because I was acting on behalf of government. The law says you will personally be liable. So both at legal procedures and execution, we are so clear about it. So torture, raping, no, rape is individual. Those ones we have always, court martial has always dealt with it very aggressively. So any soldier who smokes bang or takes warrant and rapes a person, you can't say it is a policy of the army. So those are done about it. Maybe the only thing that I have not, I think, but for us, we still maintain it as a pro-people army.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Sarah, you can rebut as you speak, but I wanted to bring in there's a sentiment on social media of people blaming the West for most of our problems. But at the same time, we see people like Bongo who banned internet. And once it was opened, he cried for people to make noise on the same internet. We see Mr. President Bior in Sierra Leone, doing all the things he did, including the accusation that Mugabe's wife was usurping a lot of responsibilities. We see the cabinet in Sierra Leone largely dominated by that. We see Mnangagwa, and some of the acts. What do you have to say to a lot of these people on social media, including presidents themselves saying, this is Western influence, the West is attacking our democracy. But at the same time, we see some of these acts from them.
Okay, just a clarification before I answer.
Yes, please.
Are people saying the West is attacking their democracy through coups?
No, in general. We have, for example, the Francophobic wave in West Africa.
Yes.
For blaming all the problems on the West. And the West has also come
Who
back
is
to
blaming the West? Is it the people or is it the
I know. I know
Popular
the
sentiment.
people have France features
Yes.
highly in the coups.
Mm.
The first people that should take blame
Mm.
are the Africans.
Yes, please.
The dominance and exploitation of France to its former colonies is as a result of a failed leadership.
Mm.
Because it was France the only colonizer. If you, for example, in Niger, where France was literally the central bank of Niger, who do you blame that on? You have independence. At independence, you determine what you want to maintain. There was a colonial setup. The whole of Africa, by the most countries in the world were colonized, including America.
Yes.
So it's not that it's Africa, but it's only Africa which is lamenting on being colonized. America had to liberate itself from Britain dominance, and they don't talk about it. So at independence, the question is, what did we liberate in terms of structures? The economic structures until today for most countries, whether Commonwealth or the Francophones, we are still dependent on the Western economic structures. You can look at the suspension of World Bank in Uganda. You can look at now the struggle for emergence of BRICS as a superpower. But they also failed to resolve the issue of currency, and then they said in the meantime they will use the dollar. So those are the questions that we failed in the days of Kwame Nkrumah, when he was saying political liberation first, then seek ye first the political kingdom, and the rest shall be added unto you. So when you go to the Francophone countries, those that failed even to build their national central banks and their currency, first goes to France, comes back. Yes. There's a time I was flying to Central African Republic, and the available flights were to go through Paris. And we were wondering, now you leave Entebbe, you go to Paris, and then you come back to Banjul. To Banjul. And it sounded ridiculous. Until we had to create a temporary flight to use South Africa, then we boarded, went to Cameroon.
You refused to go to France.
No, but how? Why do you first go to Europe in order to visit your neighbor? So these are things of a failed leadership. The connectivity of Africa.
Yes.
It's a question of a failed leadership. You look at how routes are negotiated. Uganda Airlines, their weaknesses notwithstanding, have just managed to add 1 or 2 routes, including India, and there's another they've added. They have a direct flight to Arusha once a week. And we are talking of fast-tracking the East African Federation. 1 direct flight once a week. You go to Arusha, just our neighbors here.
And it goes on Tuesday, a very unfavorable day.
You go to Arusha, you have to spend a whole day traveling through Nairobi when you are going to Arusha. For you to land in Kilimanjaro, you leave here early in the morning, spend about 4 hours in Nairobi. Then I mean, really.
Madness.
And you wonder why? Like, is the airway between Entebbe and Kilimanjaro so congested that we cannot get flights? So what East African Federation are we talking about? What? When you cannot connect your people to trade, what federation are we talking about? You are going to, like when you are going to Ghana, the time spent in Addis Ababa. Why are you going to the north then come back to the west? You know, there is a lot of things that maybe African Union maybe needs to take a break. So when you come to the failures, what the challenges of breakdown of rule of law, the first thing that African countries destroyed were the constitutional frameworks. Most of these countries where coups are, they lifted the term limits. Like Bongo, Ali Bongo, the father had ruled for 43 years. Then you come the son, you add 13 years.
But he lifted term limits in 2013.
Yes.
Removed them.
Yes.
Literally paving way
So
for
the failure of constitutionalism, failure of rule of law, and the mismanagement of elections is what has thrown those three elements. Is what has thrown these countries into chaos. So part of the symptom that then comes, the symptom of those three, maybe you can add institutions, which go hand in hand with the rule of law, because the rule of law is upheld by institutions. Absence of credible institutions, breakdown of rule of law, breakdown of constitutionalism, which goes with human rights, and the messed up elections, which are deliberate to keep dictators in power. I rule you 50 years. If I'm to go, then you deal with my son. I'm told the grandchild was now preparing. The son of Ali Bongo was warming up also to retain the throne. And then you think people are gods? You think you are presiding over gods in a farm?
Or sheep. Goats can be
So, and then these tendencies are manifesting here in Uganda. You lift term limits, you lift age limits, you mess up elections with the army, and that's why I was contesting the so-called philosophy of the army.
Us up for
If you look at paper, yes, Uganda has good laws. So for Uganda's context, you don't refer people to paper. What is the practice? If the army is accountable, who shot people on Kampala Street? Who murdered the people? Who tortured the Bobi Wine in Arua when he appeared in court martial in Pink? Who planted the guns in his hotel room, a case that you could not sustain? Who beat up people in whatever?
Who tattooed Kakwenza?
I mean, really. So don't refer to the rule book. The laws are there, but who will respect the laws when the president cannot respect the constitution? Who will respect the laws? And he's the commander-in-chief. You can look at the behavior of his son, which violates presidential authority, executive authority. He's the commander-in-chief. He cannot uphold the constitution. And you are referring Ugandans to the laws? What a joke.
I started with the spirit.
Yeah, but who is holding that spirit? Who?
The registered parties are not allowed to mobilize.
You see, our constitution is very clear. Article 96. The president is the fountain of honor. He's the moral compass of a country. He's the commanding-chief of the security forces. So when you have the moral compass of a country facing downward, what laws are you referring to the people?
There seems to be a gap between what
She's facing
The law
down.
book.
Yeah.
And the reality.
there seems to be something we have to bridge, but we'll do that in the second segment. There we have it, our dear viewers. Seek first the political question, and all the rest will fall in line. Stick with us as we continue with this discussion on the trial of democracy that we see across the African continent with my very able and informative panel discussion. Thank you very much. Till the second segment.
The Citizens Chatroom happens every Friday at 2 p.m. on Civic Space TV Online on Facebook and YouTube. We invite you to be part of this conversation. Civic Space TV, freedom always.
Welcome back to the second segment of this discussion where we are discussing democracy on trial in Africa. We are particularly zeroing down on cases of Zimbabwe, Sierra Leone, and Gabon. And with me is, of course, a very informative and expert panel to discuss some of these issues for you, our dear citizens. And would like to continue right with the discussion. And I would like to go to you, Mr. Muguzi. We have seen elections in... Firstly, I'd like to say Gabon had a failed coup in 2019. Yeah, but then this year we saw it being successful. Possibly it could have been because, you know, people are now starting to see that change can be caused in that way. We saw in Niger as well, with Bazoum and all these other countries. People are starting to think that perhaps a ripple effect, that change can happen through these means. As a coordinator at an African level, what advice do you have for governments whose elections are coming up in due course? We have seen Biya preparing by shuffling the whole army leadership. But what advice do you have, you know, sustainable?
He shuffled them from his hotel in
You know,
France.
Africa is suffering from an age of zombie elections. So you talked about Niger, and of course we are in discussions with the African Union, and you find that it's also something we need to find a day and talk about.
Yes.
Because the African Union has been sleepwalking for the longest time. But the thing is that if you look at Niger, for example, our citizen observers in Niger told us that that election that brought in Bazoum, they questioned and were writing, is this democracy or manecracy? Because Bazoum just used the money to buy everything. So it was money literally that spoke and bought everybody. If you're looking to understand if money talks, what does it say? You would have seen it saying it in Niger. So it's the army that now, you know, in circumstances where the regime or the leaders have so much entrenched themselves in authority that they have captured all institutions. They have made sure that civil society is so suppressed that you literally cannot organize as civil society. So that leaves it with only the army. Now, these countries were only lucky that within the military setting, there are progressive forces that were still patriotic that rose to the occasion. Now, our message to the rest of African countries that are having elections is that, first of all, desist from organizing the living dead of elections. Things that look like elections only in form but devoid of any substance. Let elections have some credibility. Stop capturing the electoral management bodies. Because the moment electoral management bodies are captured and they are serving the interests of the sitting regime, you are in for disaster. Zimbabwe is not out of the woods yet.
Yes.
You see, so the country is coming up, Liberia now, having elections, because what we saw, you see, I've been looking at what happened in Gabon and looking at what happened in Uganda in 2021. Violence against supporters of opposition candidates. I mean, supporters. It was worse in Uganda because people lost lives.
Yes, please.
We argue it was in hundreds. The state says it was around 56 or something. But we think we had a century, lives lost. Shot senselessly on the streets of the capital city, killed. And one of the generals comes out and says, police has the right to shoot you and they will. That level of arrogance did not happen in Gabon, but it happened here. The turning off of internet, the witch hunt, we didn't have curfew, but curfew was there. But also the denial of the opposition to access media stations, the turning off of radios and TVs. So countries that are organizing elections and are going to continue seeing this are in a problem, and you know why? Because you see, citizens sit and look and see what happened in Guinea, a regime that was flouting and violating the constitution, removed militarily. Then you have Mali, then you have Burkina, you have Chad before that, you have Burkina Faso, and Burkina Faso happened twice because there was a counter coup. And then you had in Niger, and then you go to Gabon, and hey.
Do you think it's important that at the time these things were happening in Uganda, there was all the schools have happened in the last 2-3 years.
Yes.
So would it be different now?
And the other thing that is happening is that all the places where the coups have happened, the regimes have been complacent. They've said, oh, no, it can't happen here.
Yes.
It happens in Guinea. Oh, the Mali one say, oh, it can't happen here. It comes. The Burkina Faso, oh, it can't happen here. It comes. Oh, Niger says, oh, it can't come. We have Bajoum. It comes. Now the Gabon guy, he knew everything was in his control. That arrogance, it came. Now, so the countries that are going to organize elections now have to understand that citizens have looked and seen, including the very living example of Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso has a 34-year-old leader. This man is inspiring many young people.
Traore, yes.
We have many young people in the military. In fact, many of them are having second thoughts. Many of them have thought that for me to be a leader, I should first rise to the rank of general. Hey, no. Ibrahim Traore is not a general, he's a captain. You can be a sergeant and take over. So they know. And they look, and let us not imagine that they don't have brains. They have ideas. They don't have to show you. So I think we have to be wired. And for any country where a regime has been in office for over 3 decades, such as Uganda, we are candidates. We have to get out of this arrogance. Oh, it can't happen here. Who tells you? Because you see, the power you had yesterday, you people holding power in Uganda, is not what you have today. The thinking and the mentality of Ugandans that you found here in 1986 is not the mentality of Ugandans today.
True.
They don't have to say it. So I think we have to be careful. We have to stop raping constitutions. We have to understand that we need not to build dynasties. These things, people want to see change. The people in Zimbabwe, the people in Gabon, first of all, who turned out in numbers to vote out the regime, the people in Zimbabwe who turned out to vote out the regime, did sought for to have change. You have denied them the chance to have change. So I think the writing is as clear as the biblical mene teke ufasin. If you can't read it, it's up to you. But things have changed. Africa has changed. There is an explosion of social media. And they are forgetting that this explosion brings some things with it. You don't expect that people don't see what's happening in Burkina Faso, in Gabon, and they're drawing lessons. So I think we have a lot to learn in terms of how we had a democracy.
Which you talked of Mnangagwa suffering with that name, coming here to consult. But if you were to give advice to a president or an electoral commission, which African countries would you maybe ask them to benchmark on, for example?
But who can you benchmark on? First of all, you see, the problem with Zimbabwe, and I wanted to...
Major Pollar says Uganda.
I wanted to clarify this. You see, when you are looking at Zimbabwe,
yes,
you need to understand that from the coming in of Mnangagwa, that regime that has been in office is actually not a democratic one, it's a military regime. Because the foundation of Mnangagwa regime is coup d'etat. It was a coup d'etat in everything but name. It was a coup d'etat. Mnangagwa is a figurehead of the military. It's the military pulling the levers in. The foundation of the regime in Uganda is military. You see, you cannot supplant democracy on a military regime. And there was a point here when the military comes out and they to help us to go back to democracy. A military cannot take you back to democracy until they submit, first of all, they hand over the reins of power to a civilian government. But if they want to stay, that they organize the transition, you see, we have problems there. And so there are quite a number of things you benchmark now. Which one are you going to benchmark? Ghana? It has its own issues. So Africa has issues to do with the weight. Maybe you can talk about Sao Tome. Tanzania, you have the Chama cha Mapinduzi that has fused itself with the government and it's literally a one-party regime. You know, it's a zombie.
There's nothing
democracy there in Tanzania. There's nothing like democracy there. So until we see somebody links and forcefully Chama cha Mapinduzi from the state of Tanzania, you can't. But I think you have Sao Tome, you have maybe the Comoros. I don't see, because if you read the report of Freedom House, you get to see that more than half of the countries in Uganda are ranked in Africa rated as autocratic. Many of the countries have moved towards autocracy. No wonder Russia becomes very, very interesting for them to associate with, because autocracy buddies with autocracy.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'll come back to you, Doctor, to discuss further on that. But I wanted to go to Major Pollar as someone in the capacity of Inchibes here. We have seen, from an economic point of view, a withdrawal of a lot of money from some of these countries. We saw FedEx, for example, leaving Gabon, and it's now an issue. I was reading somewhere that countries that are politically fragile are going to suffer attracting some of these major investments. I think Uganda was flagged fragile earlier this year or last year by the American state as a fragile state. And do you think, and also by the mere statements of some of our colleagues here, that's a candidate for a coup given the circumstances, do you think these are things that could affect us in terms of our economic development?
Of course, we all know that our budgeted tariff system is connected to our development partners. So anything that affects us. But I'm not so sure about the flagging I'm hearing from you.
Yes.
But before I come there, let me first talk about the amendment of the Constitution as a basis for causing all these things. A Constitution is a living document. It is not hard and frozen, just like any other law. When you legislate, you think you have done your best, even in normal legislation in Parliament. But when you put it in practice, you see the cracks. And that is why we continue to elect Parliament after every 5 years. Because laws, when you put it to the test, you see cracks. And that is the basis of amendment of the Constitution. So amendment of a Constitution is not a bad thing. What is important here, as I said earlier, is the spirit and the truth. It is only the truth that will save us. And I've said it here and again, that how comes Article 1 says power belongs to the people, and the people have never exercised it by rising and overthrowing NRM. It's not the amount of guns that you have. It's not the amount of tanks that you have.
But
the people have their brain.
About,
yes, the people have their brain. When the agitators are agitating and they throw it to the people read between lines. They said, hey, you're saying there's no democracy. But I've seen the entire central region has been won by opposition. So is it true that there is that? Or why didn't they rig? So for you, you will theorize, you will philosophize, you will bring all the academic jargons, all the NGO language, but the people also have a brain. They'll say, you go ahead with your thing. So it is only the truth that saves us. So if you amend the Constitution, do you amend it and abuse it, or you leave term limit, or you leave age limit, but you do it in the spirit of the people, and then you have democracy. Otherwise, the academization, the slogan will not, and yet Article 1 says power belongs to the people. Then, I have also heard constantly the allegation. So on that, I want to say it is only the truth that will save any government. Are you doing the right thing? Because the people have brains, like my colleagues have said. And that's why nobody has taken upon his hand the use of Article 1, power belongs to the people, by way of insurrection or whatever. Now, it's not because the people are cowards. People understand and they see the discrepancy. You sloganeer, you academize it, but the people say, hey, just a minute. You're saying there was rigging? When I've seen where the umbrella was popular, they have all won. And then where the umbrella was not popular, they have lost. And you're telling me there was that rigging? You go on the street alone. They stay away. So, the other thing is, there has been a lot of talk about 50 people dead on Kampala street.
54?
54?
The official
Come on.
Yeah, the official
Come on.
figure.
I even wonder which, I would really want, this matter should be settled to rest.
That was the
If
official
it is
figure.
true, an official, I want to know this official government
The
position.
president
His
said
Excellency,
it.
the
His
president
Excellency said
accounted
it.
for 54 people.
I want to know. I
That's
don't
what he
believe it.
said.
You see, Doctor, Berlin City, from east to west, is like from Natete to Jinja. That is just one city. But Kampala City, from Bat Valley through Kampala Road to this Kid Gum house, how many kilometers are those? And you tell me there were 50 people shot on this street. Literally, you are saying every 10 meters there was a dead body. Who saw that?
They were actually
Why
shot
would you-
between the Bank of
The problem,
Uganda.
I think the issue.
And there were 50 people.
I think the issue
is
is
And there were 50 people.
He does not go downtown. So that's why he fights.
You people, let's be real.
we
You
saw them.
see, when we
They were
destroy
there,
this
sir.
country, we are all in the frying
No,
pan.
they were
You
there.
cannot tell me on Kampala Road, that short span of
It
the
was
road,
not Kampala
there are
Road.
50 people killed on the street. This exaggeration is
It was
blowing
not
our country
it
out of
was not-
context.
It was not Kampala Road,
His
sir.
Excellency, the
It was
Me,
not
if
Kampala
this is
Road.
the case, then I will raise it as a ruling party to bring it to the fore, and we account for the 54, and they should be compensated and put to rest. Or let it, if it is not true, people should shut up forever. Because how you tell me a street of 2
Major
kilometers that there were 50 people?
Where were you, by the
No
way?
way.
Where
Did you
were
see it?
Were you in UN?
Did you see it yourself?
Yes, I was
You
there.
saw dead body?
Downtown, yes,
President
sir.
Museveni, in
Downtown.
an address on
Downtown.
November
That
29,
was-
And the
Yeah.
said
president go there.
54
No,
people
that was
were
an
We are going
killed.
there.
Well, I
Plus,
think we can.
So we can't say
This is
in a
the
small.
president.
No, I
On
don't
29th
believe in that.
November,
word.
one
You
look for his
cannot tell
speech.
me in a
No,
small
Mr.
street
Moderator,
of
Mr.
3
Moderator,
kilometers.
I think it's important to clarify
I think we
to
need to translate the issue of
clarify
numbers.
to our
Let's
audience.
settle this issue of numbers because I
Data which go to President Museveni's address on 29th November 2020.
They
He
counted.
stated himself, his address is on his social media.
after counting.
He stated himself that 54 people were killed, mostly by shooting during the 3-day
I
disturbances.
think he was in UN at
This
the time.
is the president's speech.
So,
Not his
that's
website.
when we tell
And I
you
think,
people,
I think
people,
54 was actually counted.
Actually,
That's a bigger
by the
number.
way, other sources
accusation.
put,
100.
put the deaths
There were 100.
close to 200.
So
It's only the
I am
president
still
who says
saying
54.
that matter of erroneous figure need to be sorted out. Otherwise, if we do that, all of us are in this country. We can speak it with excitement, but we are killing this country. You cannot have a street, a 3-kilometer street, 50 bodies lying on the street. Literally every 10
Not on
meters there
one
was a dead.
street.
Never.
on Kafume
Now,
Road
on
only.
the Uganda fragility, I've already considered by saying, you look at it from the perspective of budget support. Every year we read budget. We have budget support from our development partners. So we cannot say you cannot say with arrogance that we don't need them. We need them. However, we have all attempts to make sure that we have our own budget system. But before we reach there, we need our friends. You also know very well that even if you have a neighbor who support funding in your house, they will dictate to you. If they want to buy food, to pay your rent, you do everything. They'll tell you they'll go to the extent of telling you what time you should come home and what time your children should be out of the house or not. So it is better that you can buy food in your own house and sustain yourself. Then we can live within the civilized group of nations on equal ruling, on equal footing. Some small countries like Qatar, which has literally citizenship of about 500,000. Small countries like Liechtenstein, which is the richest country in the Europe with 37,000 people. You don't hear such dictation. But we can only live in the civilized group of nations as members of the United Nations through the governing conventions and other international instruments in equality. But before that, we need to listen to them. But this fragility, I don't know in what
I will
yardstick.
confirm the source. It was all over news. I'm surprised.
I don't know.
It was actually headline.
Which one?
But
Uganda being declared
fragile
state.
Yes,
the
but
headline.
if they do that, I don't know what yardstick
But
they
my-
use.
my-
But
my-
all it said is, whether we're fragile or not, the point is do we still need our development partners? Even if they had not flagged us fragile anyway, we still need development partners.
Yes.
But if they did and it affects the funding, that is a point of worry. And that's why some of us internally pose a lot of criticisms, especially to the excesses of the state, if that is one of the conditions. We may be here in public, but inside, in the right forum, we do say,
with the commissaries.
we say, this is not the correct way, this is not, we do it. Because we all want a good country anyway.
Yes.
And who is happy about a torture?
The spirit of my question was...
As a researcher, I've spoken with the private sector, and you don't only think in terms of development partners.
Yes,
Speak
yes, that is
about
the
the
point.
investors.
The investor looking at
so
Uganda
the investor
right now.
says, I come to a country like Uganda, I'm looking for an investment of 30 years because that's the time I need to recoup my investment. But they look at the president. Can you give him 20 more years when he's still alive? You can't.
Yes.
Because he's not a piece of machine. He doesn't have 20 years. So if I'm to come here and put out a business of 30 years, then I look at him and I look at, is there a clear, definite path to transition? It's not there. It's all chaos. So until that is clarified, and when they're looking at fragility,
my implication about development partners is far and wide. It includes investors.
Yeah, so
It includes investors.
the fragility looks at the next 30 years. Does anybody know, can anybody tell with the precision of a Jewish priest how we are going to transit from the current regime? Or are we thinking he's going to stay alive for the next 30 years?
People are saying transition has already taken place.
Oh, it has taken place. the Bongo transition.
Yeah,
the Bongo
transition.
From Omar Bongo to Ali Bongo. Okay. But where is Gabon now?
Yes.
After 13 years.
Yes, and we'll continue to have that discussion. It's important to assess it that way, to see where people are looking at Uganda, they're looking at Africa, and they're making decisions on where to put their money. And there are options. I believe it's important for all of us as members of this country to stay attractive to international trade. But
if I may say something small,
yes.
on the, each time and on this show, we have been contradicting on the 54 killings. First of all, it's the president's address. I have actually seen the same address had details of names and police references and everything. So you pick a name, one day CRB, just for example, 5:32/2020, death by shooting of Wile Kayondo. Around 7:30 hours. During riots at
That's why you find it difficult to believe, but it happened.
One General Inquiry File 032/2020, death by shooting of Soft Sasra. And the list goes on and
all
on.
of these were downtown.
So when
You sent to me.
She was not in the country, so you can't believe it happened.
You sent to me.
I'd like to bring
you said to me that
you talked of the journey of democracy of Africa.
It's painful.
And you said maybe this is part of the journey. If I understood you well, this could be us building our organic democracy, because the one we have had before is something that we have been asked or forced to follow. But we have just finished the BRICS summit. We have this Eastern bloc of Russia, China, and to some extent Turkey. What do they have in this journey of democracy? Are they equal partners, or are they another force of imperialism that we have to be careful about?
Oh, difficult question. Yes. Democracy, even where it is,
yes,
it went through evolution and stages until it reached where it is.
Yes.
Be it in ancient Greece where it started, be it in modern Europe after Renaissance, be it in America or France, there were revolutions, there were wars, and there were commitments. America, of course, had the advantage of claiming its independence far earlier, than we did. So even other countries, it's on the African continent that is getting into independence at the close of, in the mid and the close of the last century. Independence for Africa is a mixed reality. There were guys, leaders who were really committed to seeing Africa, gain autonomy, gain sovereignty, and determine its own affairs.
Yes.
But the experience from the time of independence up to now, then you begin to see, okay, most of our leaders, it seems, were not interested in independence for their countries and independence for the continent, but I think they were envying the colonial master and their seat and their power and their office. And when they gained office,
Independence for greed.
independence for greed, they have done everything the colonialists did, sometimes even worse. Yeah, sometimes even worse. Many things have taken place since independence, and they're good leaders. In my own assessment, there seems to be overall lack of sense of direction as far as Africa is concerned. And that lack of sense of direction is because we don't seem to have defined what our interests are as individual countries within Africa and as a continent. And because we have not defined those interests, every leader is pulling for their stay, is interested in their stay, not even about their people, not even about the region. From so many years with the East African community, Sarah was asking pertinent questions. If we cannot trade, if a country can close a border for 3 years, you know, and nothing is going on. So now the unique disadvantage of Africa, and I don't want to dispel, you know, the foreign influence, is that Europe were the original controllers.
Yes.
America joined them. China has joined them. Russia has joined them. So, in other words, the forces of contestations have become so numerous and so diverse. You only need very smart leaders. I agree with Sarah, the question of leadership. You need to get a blend of leaders who are not merely interested in their stay in power, expanding the family role, expanding the role of their colleagues and their relatives into knowing we have resources as Africans. What are these resources for? They are for the good of our people. What is interesting, Belgium steals resources in Congo. France does that. But when they take these resources, they become national repositories. They come to the economy and they are delivering services. Us who have these resources, even when we have the opportunity to pick it, it goes to our pockets and the pockets of our friends and our relatives and our supporters and those who are keeping us in power. And because of that lack of clarity on what we want, and inability to get to a platform, okay? America federated. There are more than 50 states, and they are working together. Whether it is Canada, it is also, you know, a federal state. Europe went into a union. Africa, even our own African Union, we do not have the capacity to fund its activities. We go to Europe and America to ask them for funding. Not necessarily that we do not have enough resources to run our own affairs, but because we have even failed at management of resources because of the selfish interests that I am talking about. And once there are all those conflicting issues within the equation, then we fail to clean the politics. You know, politics defines the ideals, whether it is rule of law, whether it is human rights, whether it is democracy, that is at the political level. When Major says, you know, the spirit is there, then we should be seeing corresponding commitment to turn the spirit and the ideals within the law into reality. And when that commitment is not there, then we become a product that is sought by very many other people out there, and our leaders are conniving. Yeah, instead with those who are taking our resources, and they are becoming repressive because they want to remain into leadership. So if we clean our politics, if we define our interests, and then agree on how to pursue these interests, not as individual countries, but as regional and continental blocs, I think we will remain in this kind of conundrum for a while, especially given, you know, the intensified global interest in Africa. Africa is now an isolated gold out there, where everybody wants a share of it.
Yes.
Everybody wants a share of it, which goes to the second part. You're talking about the BRICS. I don't think that the arrangement with the BRICS is going to be any more different from the way we relate with Europe and with. We are members of United Nations. That is United Nations working in our favor. I don't know. If, okay, the little advantage is that the partners within the BRICS, whether it is South Africa or what, they have their own political problems, but at the economy level, they seem to be, you know, a little bit, you know, powerful and knowing what they are doing. If they can understand their position and leverage it, and define their interests, but also even the nature of the cooperation.
But that still needs Africa to know its interests.
Yes, we need to know our interests. Our interests have been convoluted in the interests of our leaders. It's the interests of our leaders that have taken the political show,
Yes.
and we remain in this kind of chaos. If we negotiate well within those within the BRICS fraternity, and knowing, okay, you have the technology, but I have the resources. How do your technology meet my resources, and how do we meet midway, you know, for us to have mutual benefits? We can only talk about mutual benefits if we know what we want, if we know what we have, and how to, you know, cooperate with with the partners that we are cooperating with. If we don't define that, the leaders will define what they need for us, and we shall keep in this chaos.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Okay.
I'd like to bring in Dr. Bireete on that, but zeroing it down to elections. Have you seen this multipolarity playing out in elections? You know, where you know, leaders are getting more impunity, they are abusing observers, they're doing all these things simply because now there's not any singular supervisors. There are probably more options. Have you seen it playing out in any of the elections that you've been able to observe?
Well, if I may use the Uganda example, the EU member states never thought accreditation. They were clear, and they issued a statement before that since all their previous recommendations were never implemented, they are not going to observe elections again in Uganda. We had the USAID team that they wanted to deploy about 80 observers, short-term observers, and only 15 were accredited, and they also later pulled out. So if you go by that to see what happened in that very election, where you had the regional groupings, Commonwealth, EAC, led by Burundi, and others. And I think those were the two that we had. Commonwealth, African Union, and the EAC. And then the domestic election observers. If you see what transpired in that election, already we are talking of, I was reading references of people that were shot. That was the election period. Opposition rallies were dispersed. Opposition candidates shot at. And then they arrested numerous times, and then election observers arrested on voting day. And internet, of course, switched off. So all that happened in that election.
Journalists battered.
Yeah, journalists battered. Even in the post-election, as Chagulanyi was taking a petition at UN, journalists beaten on camera by the army, which our colleague thinks has a philosophy. And so going by that, you can see that the lack, the opaqueness of a process is demonstrated in the people that have come to observe it. But also international observers have seen a tendency of dictators who try to sugarcoat issues before them and do a lot of public relations. Previously, international observers have been giving contradictory reports as compared to those of domestic observers. Because of the PR machineries of government, if, for example, Commonwealth observers step here and the government tells them, you go to Churhura, go to Guru, or go to, so they know the places where there will be no chaos and they take them there. So there have been a lot of optical, you know, optical censorship, if I may call it that, to the international observers who remain then in a kind of utopia moment as compared to the abuses in elections. But we have been able, and I'm happy about Sierra Leone and Zimbabwe and Gabon, where you see that the language of election observer reports by international observers is now the same as the local observers, because they are observing the same election. It's not that we write for them what to read. But that gap that the dictators have been exploiting to mislead international observers has closed. So now they are able to see elections and the ugly scenes play in their faces to their naked eyes to observe. So I'm happy that that information gap has closed and they see elections for what they are. So what happens when a long-serving leader, and there's a statement by President Museveni that was very accurate and that I believe in. The problem of Africa are not its people, but the leaders who rule for long. Very accurate. Perfect statement. Later, when he got conflicted, he tried to amend it by adding not through elections, but it failed. The point had been made. So I think for me that is the gist of the whole crisis we are discussing in Africa. You look at, in Niger you can say that the president had not stayed for long. But the 2-3 years for which he was in power, I think it is between 2 and 3, the arrogance of power that he demonstrated was too much.
Because he had bought off everybody.
Was too much for the people to take. And then the connivance with France. Because you connive with France, you can see one of the clips going viral where Ali Bongo was limping, but Macron holds him and they are whispering.
And then he did the same for
I was thinking, I said, okay, is he saying I've brought your uranium somewhere in the bag? Just yes, because what are those whispers for? Then he's holding, it's, I have your bag. Even when you are falling, it's me too. Kind of
your back stops.
Yes. So when unpopular leaders, they get 1 or 2 superpowers. Say, you want your God is here. In exchange, keep him in power. It is a common tendency. Even Mobutu played that one. Mineral politics with the French and Belgium. I have your back, you root my country, but keep me in power with a few toys here and there. And that seems to be the practice where these coups have happened.
Yes.
For Uganda's case, our oil is still underground, although people have eaten a lot of money on it, even when it is still underground. I think that the day it comes out of the ground, if we have not got transition, Uganda will be worse than Gabon.
Do you see it coming?
But they say the first drop will be released in 24, 25.
We have passed many deadlines, so don't believe until you see it.
Mr. Muguzi, there's a common question that is international law really law? And I just want to use that as a symbol, because is there a risk that with, China, Russia coming up, that opinions from largely Western observers, Carter Foundation, maybe also Western founded, but even the Western government's opinion, we see the American opinion, EU opinion, African Union opinions. Is there a risk that these opinions will cease to matter?
I think, before I come to your point proper, let me build on the point he was making. The point he was trying to making about how we relate to the Western world.
Yes.
And as was making his submission, there's this theory that came into my head. I think they call it chicken something theory, where someone rears chicken, shows chicken so much love, gives it light, warmth, food on time, immunizes it, loves it so much. And one chicken was telling the others that, you see, this guy could be the one that is taking all our brothers and sisters. Another one saying, no, this guy loves us. First of all, he got us as we were kids. He has immunized us. He gives us food on time. At one time, when we delayed to have food on time, he came running and made sure we have food. This can't be the one.
Immunized.
The West has been plundering from Africa for the longest time. Okay? Let us not be like chicken. That the very people who took us into slavery, who came and enslaved us on our own land through colonialism, who have plundered our resources, are going to be the very people who are going to like us and so on, which is what now brings in the whole issue of the BRICS. I know you saw when push came to shove, when we needed COVID vaccines, what happened? We had to struggle. We could not find the vaccines. Let Africa perish if it can. So be it. So I think now with the coming of Russia, we have now some big brother who can say, oh, you hide here. Although we have to go open-eyed. Now back to your question.
Yes.
You see, the West has a problem of trying to understand Africa using their own lenses. And that's a problem. I think they have not taken off enough time to understand it through our own lenses as Africans. They don't understand us. And therefore, when they come to give us recommendations, advices, and guidance, I think we need to take it not wholeheartedly. Because remember, we did it before. They came here and said privatize. My brother Ramadan Govi says always, and I remember this, he says, when they came here and said privatize, open up the door, we did not only just open up the door, we ripped it out. And all hell broke loose. The thing is, can we be able to kind of filter through some of the advice they gave us? Because not all of it is applicable.
But
the problem we are having,
what said about interest, right?
Yes, and what is their interest, first of all? My sister was making a submission about France. I was in Cote d'Ivoire with Francophone. Okay, I had moved from Cameroon, then I went to Togo, then I reached Cote d'Ivoire. I discovered that the money I picked from Cameroon was actually the same money when I looked at what Togo, because I was collecting currencies. I was collecting currency of Cameroon, then I collected Togo, then I was in Cote d'Ivoire. It was the same currency, so I said, wait a minute, help me here. Is this the same currency? So I was told that, you see, in France told us, we give you independence, we shall be your central bank. So monetary, the independence you don't have. We shall also be looking after you so you don't have the military independence. And so most of their reserves and the central banks they don't have central banks. They have it where? In France. At one time they told me ECOWAS had planned and agreed on making sure that we have one currency as ECOWAS. Working through the favorable, the what are they called? The chaps of the French. I think it's number one is Cote d'Ivoire. They use Cote d'Ivoire to sabotage any efforts aimed at making sure that Francophone West Africa secures independence. And then the other one is Senegal. So you get to see that the interests of these colonizers remain. And I am not sure that they would want to see us, advance from where we are. Remember, when these fellows came to, I don't know where you were in 1986 though, but when they took over power in 1986, when they took over in 1986, the West came and told them, we are going to help you to develop your country. You drop these tendencies of barter trade. They listened and they said, okay. By 2020, by the year 2000, 99, 2000, I think Genome 7 had to look and say that actually the country was falling short on roads, the infrastructure wasn't there. He was doing badly on all forms of service delivery. That's when he decided to go China And when it goes China, things start happening very quickly. And I remember one of the UN people telling me that he had to tell them straight that you people, I don't trust you, you misled me. So the West, we have to look at that West with a pinch of salt, and we have to be Africans. And what do we tell Africans now? You see, if we can be able to get good leaders, because we don't have, the current leadership of Africa is driven by selfish interests. We do not have love for country. Those who want to entrench themselves in power don't want to entrench themselves for the sake of holding that power. They entrench themselves in power to hold on onto it so that they can gain access to resources and enrich themselves, not the countries. You raised the issue. Who raised the issue of Congo? You did, the doctor. They came here, the Europeans. They plundered Africa. They took the resources to their own countries. They became national resources. Britain, the pound sterling is supported by gold they stole from Ghana and other African countries. When we went to Congo to plunder, what did we do? We are now paying reparation costs, 65 million per year. The reparation costs of this year are falling due on 1st of September. Today is what date?
Tomorrow is
first.
So tomorrow we have to pay 65 million.
Wow.
We paid $65 million reparation costs. Last year we paid the same. These things you must know, you people who fought. We know them. We keep quiet. So you see, they went to Congo, they plundered to enrich themselves. How I wish they had plundered and brought all the gold into the central bank. Maybe we would have a stronger shilling. So those are some of the things. It's about leadership. It's about self-centered things. It's about people that behave like beasts, because the beast thinks only of themselves. It eats for itself. So I think until we have leaders that don't think beastly, and the beast in the very sense of Machiavelli is what I'm talking about. Yeah, we want leaders that can guide, that are selfless, that think for the public good and act in the public good, that can get us out of where we are.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Muguzi. And just in that same vein, our time is fast running out, but I'd like to give some parting remarks on the state of democracy in Africa, but also from a Ugandan lens.
Please, we are, as African citizens, we are tired of zombie elections. Please give us credible elections. And let me make a rallying call to what is it called? Electoral management bodies. In the case of Uganda, the Electoral Commission. You see, one of the things that are lacking in Uganda's, electoral democracy is the public trust of the electoral management body. And one of the reasons they don't have public trust is that they do things in the darkness.
Yes.
Especially the transmission and the tallying of results. Whereas there is no law that says the Electoral Commission must do this transparently. At the same time, there is no law that stops them from being transparent. And you see, it doesn't always follow that whatever is not legally provided for cannot be done, or what is legal is also morally right.
Yes.
I think on the part of the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, it is morally right to increase some transparency. And lastly, we need him to tell us as well, what is he doing right this time around that he sees went wrong? Because when he was launching the roadmap, he pretended as if the last election were very nice. They weren't nice. We wanted to hear, what is he going to do better? There were no promises from the Electoral Commission. Those are my parting shots.
Yes. Major Pollar, your parting remarks.
Parting shot is that as a continent, we need democracy, and one of the ingredients is a credible election. We should be committed to that. And it's only the truth that is the weapon to all this. So, as enshrined in our Constitution, Article 1, power belongs to the people. We can only have a peaceful country if what we are doing is truthful for the people. So that even if several agitators for their own interest call upon the people to move the way they want, it's the people who will finally decide. And for us in NRM, that's what we believe. a critical and a very objective identification of the problems and getting a solution there too. There's no shortcut about it, not the amount of arms you have. We try to address the interests of the people, and the people will move on with us.
Thank you very much, Major. And Dr. your parting remarks.
Yes, picking it from the general, I don't think that African leaders or even Ugandan leaders are not intelligent enough to know what the country needs and what the people need and what the government should achieve. As Sarah mentioned earlier, the president diagnosed the problem of Africa as far as leadership is concerned. The 10-point program, the NRM, NRA political ideology was on point. When you examine the first 10 years of NRM, the putting in place of the institution, the Uganda Human Rights Commission, which is now ranking the government as the worst violator of human rights. I think we can only progress if we switch off, the selfishness button, the personal interests of leaders, and we bring the interests of the country into the picture and allow the institutions and the laws and whatever we've talked about, to operate. When Museveni wants the Bank of Uganda to operate because he needs the money, it will operate. When he wants the economy, to work slightly well, although it is a bit hijacked again by selfish interests, you will see something working. You'll see the Ministry of Finance working. But when he wants the election to favor him, from the people he appoints, from the way the elections are managed, from how the observers are not accredited, then there is that intentional way of making things work the way they are working, not for the broader good, but for particular and parochial and selfish interests. And of course, the Saras and other middle-level leaders are doing their part, but I think to make the work easier, the country, the leaders should liberate the country. Yes. There is one person who wrote the article, Major. Was it on the media or in the papers? And he said, how much do the liberators, how much does the country owe these liberators? It
was General Amanya Mshega.
So that we pay the liberators and they give us back our country. They liberated the country instead of giving it liberation. They captured and owned it and put it in their pockets and in their offices. They go with it and they move with it. If we can get the true liberation, as Uganda, as a continent, I think we can move in the right direction.
Yes, thank you very much, Doctor. It has been a pleasure having you on the panel today. Yes, Dr. Bireete.
Yes, building on what Dr. Things has said, it was Amanya Mshega, that court, who said that these so-called liberators, and he was with them in the bush, who keep reminding people how they sacrificed and shed blood in Ruwero. Can we all gather at the square, donate blood, and they march in to Nakasero blood bank and they collect their blood bags so that they leave the country alone. So, and I think it was a good thing because you don't liberate the country to then strangle it. The way the transition is being bungled with the Bongo family dynasty style. But the way for Africa, there are 4 things in my view. Let's have term limits in every country. So that even if there is the worst leader in power, they have a maximum of 10 years and then they go. The country can be saved. Let's have independent institutions. Our electoral commission, Henry talked about the roadmap. Those Biabakamas and the team, they are all talking from under the table. They are captured. They release
captured and chained
ballots. Yeah. We need to liberate them. There is no, they cannot hold a credible election.
Correct.
They are just there to delegitimize, to legitimize the continuity of NRM. And that's their instruction. We need credible institutions. We need credible, free and fair elections. With the rule of law, independent institutions, credible elections, and term limits, Africa will take off
Stop
and develop.
witch-hunting citizens.
Africa will take off and develop. And that's what we need.
That's, yeah. Thank you very much, Doctor. As always, evergreen here on the panel. It's been a pleasure having all of you today. And for our dear viewers, I hope it has been as informative and insightful as it was for me. We were discussing the trial of democracy in Africa, zeroing down on the cases of Sierra Leone, Gabon, and Zimbabwe, but also very much looking at it from the lens of Uganda. Till next time on the Citizen Chat Show, it was a pleasure hosting. Thank you.